Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. A very good morning to everyone and welcome to our daily Hindu analysis. So before we begin, we have a couple of important announcements. We are very happy to announce that we are launching a couple of new initiatives starting this week. We are starting Polity Essentials, which will help you cover some important polity-related topics for your prelims and mains. This is going to be a limited series and we shall upload these videos at 7 p.m. We're also launching Indian Economy Essentials to help you cover important static topics and current affairs related to Indian economy. This would also go up every evening, so do watch out for these videos on our YouTube channel. Do support the initiatives as well by liking our videos, comment them, and also ensure you subscribe to our channel. So let's start with today's The Hindu analysis by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss today. We have several important topics lined up for today's discussion. We have two important articles on page number 1, which I'm going to cover in complete detail. We have an article related to the Delimitation Commission in Jammu and Kashmir, which has been a controversial topic. And we shall also evaluate the draft Geo-heritage sites and Geo-relics bill, which has been brought out by the Ministry of Mines. Both the topics are very important, and let's talk about this in complete detail. Then we'll move to page number 6 and look at a couple of editorials and one column. We have an editorial related to the Office of Governor, another editorial related to the Jal Jeevan Mission, and we have a column related to urban planning, the importance of urban planning to prevent disasters. So these topics cover multiple subjects including polity, governance, and disaster management and environment ecology. So all these topics will be covered in detail, and the purpose is to ensure that you don't need any other reference material for these topics. Once you watch this session, you should be in a position to answer any question, be it in prelims or mains. So let's get started by looking at the first article. The article says Supreme Court has upheld the formation of the J&K delimitation panel. First, let's understand what is delimitation. Delimitation is essentially an act or an exercise or a process through which the limits or boundaries of territorial constituencies are fixed in order to conduct elections for a legislative body. So for the purpose of conducting elections, the constituencies have to be drawn out. The boundaries of the constituencies have to be drawn out, be it for parliamentary elections or your state assembly elections. So to carry out this exercise, a delimitation commission is established by the government of India, and this authority has the powers to identify and draw out the boundaries of the constituencies for the Lok Sabha elections and as well as for the state assembly elections. Such a delimitation exercise will also help in identifying the seats that are reserved for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. The seats which are reserved for these communities is also marked out by the Delimitation Commission. The purpose of this exercise is essentially to ensure that in every constituency, roughly the population of the electorate remains the same. This provides for a level playing field, a fair playing field for all the political parties in terms of the number of voters present in each constituency. So the idea of this whole exercise is to draw out the boundaries of constituencies so that roughly in each constituency you have the same number of voters. Even with regard to state-wise allocation of seats in the parliament, delimitation exercise helps in ensuring that each state gets a proportional representation in the parliament. With regard to their population, proportionate number of seats are allocated in the parliament as well through the delimitation exercise. So this is the whole purpose of delimitation. So to carry out this important and complicated task, an authority is established called the Delimitation Commission. It is established by the Government of India as per the provisions of the Delimitation Commission Act. So this act is enacted by the Parliament, obviously. Now let me give you an exercise here, a small assignment. Can you figure out which provision or which article in the Indian Constitution empowers the Parliament to enact the Delimitation Commission Act? There is a specific article in our Constitution which provides for delimitation exercise, and it empowers the Parliament to bring out a law, the Delimitation Commission Act, that allows the government to establish this authority. So find out which article this is and post this in the comments below. This in itself can be a very important point for a prelims question. That's why I'm giving this as a small exercise. So based on the Delimitation Commission Act, which is brought out with the Parliament, the government can establish the Delimitation Commission, which is appointed by the President of India. This commission works very closely with the Election Commission and draws out the territorial constituencies, the boundaries of the constituencies for Lok Sabha and the State Assembly elections. Now, if you look at the composition of the Delimitation Commission, it is headed by a retired Supreme Court judge, along with the Chief Election Commissioner and the respective Chief Election Commissioners. It will also consist of few associate members in the form of few MPs from the concerned state. So this would be the composition of a Delimitation Commission. Once the commission finalizes the boundaries of the constituency and once the orders are brought out by the government and notified in the Gazette, this becomes full and final. It cannot be challenged. You cannot question the final orders of the Delimitation Commission in a court, as this could disrupt the electoral process and the schedule of the elections. Hence, the recommendations of Delimitation Commission, once accepted and once notified by the government, becomes full and final. So now, coming to Jammu and Kashmir, delimitation exercise has been carried out recently again. A Delimitation Commission was constituted in 2020. So we need to understand why this exercise became necessary in Jammu and Kashmir. We shall also evaluate what is the status of delimitation across India. When was the last exercise done? What's the controversy in Jammu and Kashmir? And why did this issue reach the Supreme Court? And what the Supreme Court has said. This is what you need to understand from a mains point of view. So if you look at Jammu and Kashmir, the erstwhile state was broken down into 2 union territories through the Reorganization Act of 2019. This was after the special status of J&K was revoked under Article 370. So as the special status was revoked, the government of India reorganized Jammu and Kashmir into the union territories of J&K and Ladakh. So as a result, the number of seats in the J&K State Assembly saw a change. Previously, there were 111 seats allocated to the Kashmir, Jammu and Ladakh region, along with 24 seats that were reserved to POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. Now that Ladakh had been carved out, 4 seats were reduced, but through the Reorganization Act, 7 additional seats were added to Jammu and Kashmir. So this took up the number of seats to 114, which included 90 seats for the J&K region and 24 reserved for POK. And thus this necessitated a fresh delimitation exercise, because more seats were being added through the Reorganization Act. And the J&K Reorganization Act also provided for a delimitation commission to carry out the task of delimiting the boundaries of these constituencies. Since the very structure of the state was broken down and they were turned into union territories, and since the seats were being reorganized with more seats being allocated to certain regions, this required a fresh delimitation exercise, and hence the government has set up a delimitation commission to carry out this exercise for J&K. Now, if you look at Jammu and Kashmir, when J&K had special status, when it still enjoyed a special status under Article 370, in the erstwhile state of J&K, the delimitation of parliamentary constituencies, that is the seats to the Lok Sabha, came under the Indian Constitution. Essentially, the Delimitation Commission that would be set up by the Government of India would look after the delimitation of the parliamentary constituencies for the Lok Sabha seats. However, because of the special status that J&K had, the assembly seats, they would be delimited under the Representation of People Act of Jammu and Kashmir. So there was a distinction between the delimitation for the parliamentary seats and the state assembly seats when J&K enjoyed special powers, special status under Article 370. The parliamentary seats were under the Constitution of India. So Delimitation Commission set up by the Government of India would look after the delimitation of the Lok Sabha seats. But for the state assembly seats, the powers were vested with the authority established by the state government as per the provisions of the J&K Representation of People's Act of 1957. But now that special status was revoked under 370, and now that the state had been reorganized, the delimitation of both assembly seats and parliamentary seats has been brought under the Constitution of India itself. So essentially, to carry out the delimitation for the state assembly seats, a fresh delimitation exercise became necessary. Along with, the government wanted to delimit the constituencies to the Lok Sabha as well. So in 2020, a delimitation commission was set up for this specific purpose. It was headed by a retired Supreme Court judge, along with the Chief Election Commissioner and the J&K's Chief Electoral Officer, and 5 MPs from J&K as associate members. So this commission took up the task. It was carrying out the exercise. Its term was even extended for 1 year through another amendment. The government extended the term of the Delimitation Commission as well. And finally, it has submitted its report last year. So based on these recommendations, the constituencies are undergoing a change in J&K. Once the government starts notifying it and starts the process, the constituencies that you have in J&K will undergo a major change, both the Lok Sabha constituencies and the State Assembly constituencies. Now this has triggered a controversy. The recommendations in particular has triggered a controversy. Because if you look at the previous delimitation exercises that have been conducted across India, they have been conducted in 1952, 1963, 1973 and 2002. These were the delimitation commissions that have been set up based on the respective delimitation commission acts. Now, as I told you before, delimitation is an exercise which is conducted after every census, ideally. Based on the census data, the population data that is brought out by each decennial census, ideally a delimitation exercise has to be conducted so that the population changes are accounted for. But here I am saying that delimitation commission has been set up only 4 times. So the question is, how is this possible? Or why we haven't conducted delimitation after every census? There is a reason behind this. See, if delimitation were to be conducted after every census, there is an anomaly that comes up in the Indian context. There are few states in India which have a significantly higher population and they haven't done much to control their population as well. But there are other states which have successfully achieved their total fertility rates to the ideal level of around 2.1. They have achieved replacement level fertility. Thereby they have arrested their population growth. These states, especially in southern India, they have implemented better population control methods, and through these policies they have controlled and stabilized their population. Plus these states have grown better, they have developed, they have contributed more revenue to the center as well. But there are other larger states, particularly northern India, such as UP, Bihar, where population control has not been as successful while contributing relatively less to the Indian economy. So this discrepancy led to a major concern that as population keeps increasing in the lesser developed states, particularly the northern states, their representation in the parliament will keep increasing. If you conduct a delimitation after every census, and if these states have increased their population, right, they'll be rewarded with more seats in the parliament, because representation in the parliament for each state is proportional to its population. But the other states which are controlling their population and developing their economy, who are contributing to the national economy as well, they will be disincentivized. They will lose their representation in the parliament. So this is an anomaly that is a part of the constitution and the delimitation exercise. So to create a fairness, in 1976, during emergency, delimitation was frozen until 2001 to allow for the population to stabilize across the country, to achieve replacement level fertility, which is around 2.1. So this has been extended further through another amendment until 2026. Until 2026, delimitation was frozen in order to achieve population stabilization so that it could be uniformly done for all the states. So if population is stabilized across the country, then the seats allocated to each state in the parliament will be proportional. Approximately, it will be a fair allocation of seats, and hence delimitation has been pushed until 2026 for the rest of the country. But in certain parts like J&K and in few northeastern states like Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, delimitation exercise has been put off. The last time when delimitation was conducted, right, it wasn't conducted for parts of J&K, for northeastern states due to the security situation as well. So this necessitated a fresh exercise. And more importantly, J&K lost its special status in 2019 when the special powers were revoked under Article 370. And delimitation of J&K's assembly seats also came under the Constitution of India. So to account for all these changes, fresh constituency boundaries had to be drawn. So that is why the government set up a delimitation commission in 2020 and even extended its term for 1 year till 2021. The last time delimitation happened in J&K was in 1995 under the State Representation of People Act. After that, J&K delimitation has not happened for state assembly seats because the then Farooq Abdullah government also froze delimitation in line with the national policy, and until 2026 delimitation was not supposed to happen in Jammu and Kashmir as well. But now the government of India, since it has carried out these important changes to the very structure of the state and the structure of the assembly seats, the government of India felt that delimitation had to be conducted again because now the Union Territory of J&K and its assembly comes under the Constitution of India, unlike the Representation of People Act of the state previously. So despite the delimitation being frozen until 2026, the government set up a new delimitation commission to carry out the redrawal of the constituency boundaries for J&K and few northeastern states. So this triggered a controversy, especially regional political parties. They started alleging that the ruling party at the center was doing this deliberately to ensure that constituencies are divided on communal lines in order to create vote banks, so it would favor the ruling party. So they even challenged the establishment of the delimitation commission at the Supreme Court, and this is the case which was going on. But in Jammu and Kashmir, delimitation was frozen until 2026, which is in line with the national policy. Previously, this was even upheld by the J&K High Court and the Supreme Court. They had upheld that it is the right policy to hold delimitation until 2026, until the population stabilizes. But before that, the government has carried out another delimitation exercise, and that is the challenge here, that is the controversy. Political parties have pointed out that the establishment of this delimitation commission itself is a matter of judicial inquiry, as they have approached the Supreme Court challenging the new delimitation exercise. So here, the main concern is about the purpose of delimitation, the intent, especially of the center, behind conducting this exercise before the mandated period of 2026. And also the other concern is what parameters are being used by the delimitation commission. Generally, delimitation is based on the census data, the population data. But the delimitation commission that was set up in 2020 said, along with census data, it will take into account other factors in J&K, such as the size of the Union Territory, the remoteness of the constituencies, and the closeness of these constituencies to the border, to the disputed border with Pakistan. So all these other factors, local factors, were being taken into account, which led to concern amongst the political parties, especially the regional opposition parties, and they have alleged that the center is doing this deliberately to create a tactical division of the electorate. Now, if you look at the final recommendation of the delimitation commission, it has accounted for the 7 new seats which have been added, the 7 assembly seats which have been added, and it has carried out major changes to the boundaries of constituencies to the Lok Sabha and the assembly, especially important constituencies such as Anantnag and Poonch and Rajouri districts, the Baramulla constituency. They've all seen big changes as far as the boundaries, the constituency boundaries are concerned. So again, the concern here is that the regional parties, especially such as National Conference and the PDP, they have alleged that the center is doing this deliberately to carry out a tactical division of the electorate. They are alleging that this is a communal division of the electorate which appears to favor the ruling party. But the center denies these charges, and the center has said delimitation was necessary for practical reasons to ensure that fresh elections can be held to the new assembly of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So this is the whole controversy. The Delimitation Commission has even recommended a couple of seats for Kashmiri Pandits. And it has even recommended, it has suggested few reserved seats for those who migrated from POK back to India after partition. So these recommendations of Delimitation Commission has been contested, challenged by the regional parties. So they had approached the court challenging the very establishment of the Delimitation Commission. See, I told you earlier that the orders of the Delimitation Commission cannot be challenged, but the establishment of the commission can be challenged. So there was a petition to the Supreme Court challenging the very establishment of this commission, and these parties were alleging that the center is doing this deliberately to create a communal division of the electorate so that it favors the ruling party. So the Supreme Court, which looked into the matter, has dismissed this petition. The Supreme Court has said establishing the Delimitation Commission is valid, it is constitutional. Because if you look at Article 2 and Article 3 of the Constitution, it empowers the Parliament to redraw the boundaries, the internal boundaries of India, to create new states and union territories, to redraw the boundaries of states and union territories. So in line with these powers, J&K was reorganized. And the Reorganization Act of 2019 clearly stated that a Delimitation Commission is necessary to redraw the boundaries to the Assembly and Lok Sabha constituencies. So based on this, the Supreme Court has upheld the establishment of the Delimitation Commission. Supreme Court has said this is constitutionally valid. There's nothing wrong. It's not unconstitutional. Because Parliament has the powers to redraw the boundaries of states and union territories under Article 2 and 3. And under the Reorganization Act, the Parliament has clearly provided for establishing a Delimitation Commission. So thereby, the establishment of this commission is legally valid, constitutionally valid, as pointed out by the Supreme Court. So this judgment has led to a response from the opposition parties, especially the regional parties in J&K. The National Conference and PDP, even though they have welcomed the judgment, they have expressed their unhappiness. They have said that this weakens democracy. It results in manipulation of elections, as the recommendations of the Delimitation Commission appears to favor the ruling party at the center. This is the accusation, the allegation brought up by the regional opposition parties. But the center has denied these allegations. The center has welcomed the judgment of the Supreme Court, and the center has said that a delimitation was necessary to account for all the changes that had happened in Jammu and Kashmir. To account for the new seats and the reorganization of J&K, delimitation was necessary. So this is what you need to understand about this important controversial topic. From a prelims point of view, you should know what is delimitation, the constitutional provisions related to it, the powers of the Delimitation Commission. From a mains point of view, you should understand the whole analysis that we just discussed. So with this, let's move on to the next topic. We'll look at another article from the first page that examines the draft Geo-heritage, Geo-relics bill, which aims to preserve and maintain our geo-heritage sites. This is a very important development. In December last year, the Ministry of Mines brought out this draft bill. It has placed this important bill in the public domain, inviting feedback from the public and all the stakeholders with regard to conservation and protection of India's geological heritage. The main purpose of this bill is to protect, preserve, and maintain the geological heritage of India. When we say geological heritage, it basically refers to the natural geological sites in the country. It refers to the fossils, the sedimentary rock formations, and various other natural structures which are a result of age-old phenomena. These are geological structures which have formed millions of years ago, which represent the very basic geology of the country. And this is connected with the history and the culture of the nation as well. So it becomes very important to protect and conserve these sites, these geological heritage sites, just like we conserve and protect our biodiversity and our environment. So at the level of UNESCO, at the global level, we actually have a convention for this. There is the UNESCO Convention on Protection of the World Cultural and Natural Heritage. Right? India is a signatory to this, we are party to this. UNESCO even has the World Heritage Site Program that provides for protection, conservation of cultural and natural heritage sites. So in line with this commitment, countries are expected to adopt a law to protect their geo-heritage as well. Just like a country seeks to protect its World Heritage sites, which are of cultural natural importance, similarly, conserving and protecting geo-heritage sites is also an international obligation under this UNESCO convention. So India is a party to it. We have signed and ratified the convention. Hence, India required a law to provide for the preservation and conservation of geo-heritage sites. So in line with this commitment, this bill has been proposed with the Ministry of Mines. It has been placed in the public domain for inviting a feedback, and it hopes to provide for conservation of these important sites so that it can aid the purposes of education, research, and it could become a heritage value or a heritage asset for future generations as well. Because these natural geological heritage sites, they are non-renewable. Once you lose them, once they get eroded or once they are destroyed, right? There's no way of bringing them back. Especially today, urbanization, the rapid expanding population is posing a serious threat to the country's geological heritage. India is blessed with a very diverse geological heritage. Let me just take you through the kind of geological heritage the country is blessed with. Let's go beyond what the article is talking about and look at the geological heritage of India. See, India is blessed with many important relics, geo-relics, and very important natural geological formations which form the very geography of the country, the physical geography of the country. For example, if you look at the towering Himalayan mountains, the way the Himalayas were created by the diving of the Indian plate under the Eurasian plate, right, over 50 million years ago, this in itself is considered one of the most significant geological phenomena in the region and in the history of the region. This defines the Indian subcontinent, plays a critical role in defining the climate and all the geological factors of the Indian subcontinent. Similarly, you have the Western Ghat ranges. You have the Deccan Plateau. You have important fossils as well. We have important paleontological formations. One of the largest dinosaur fossil reserves can be found in the Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh region, right? When the Indian subcontinent was still part of the Gondwana land, and as it broke away and started moving towards the Eurasian plate, this part of Gujarat and Rajasthan, which was facing the then coastal areas, right, has been home to the Jurassic era. It has been home to important dinosaur fossils, one of the largest fossil reserves in the world. There are many old life forms which have been fossilized as well, which can be found in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh region. You find fossil formations such as stromatolites, which again are an integral part of our geological heritage. We have many cave structures, natural rock formations all across the country. In Andhra Pradesh, in Chhattisgarh, right, in Maharashtra. So there are many natural cave formations, natural rock formations, which symbolize India's rich geological heritage and the geological diversity. So to identify these sites and to protect and conserve them and to give them the required importance, the Geological Survey of India has already notified 32 sites in the country. Now this table which I have added here is very, very important for your prelims. Please make a note of this, and I expect you to put in a little effort here to read about all the 32 sites. The Geological Survey of India has notified 32 geo-heritage sites. They are also called National Geological Monuments. So 32 sites have been identified across Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Chhattisgarh, Karnataka, Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, Odisha, Jharkhand, Nagaland and Sikkim. The entire list is given with their specific location. So take this as an assignment, read about them, identify the important features, because this could be very, very important for your prelims. You can expect a question or two based on the National Geological Monuments. So a few months back, these 32 sites were already notified by the Geological Survey of India. But this alone was not enough to protect and conserve the geological sites. We needed a law, because this is a commitment for the UNESCO Convention as well. We have an obligation under the UNESCO Convention to bring out a law that provides for the preservation and maintenance of these sites. So first we notified the National Geological Monuments. The Geo-heritage sites have been notified by the Geological Survey of India. And now a draft bill has been brought out by the Ministry of Mines. Is that clear? The Geological Survey of India functions under the Ministry of Mines. The GSI is one of the oldest organizations in India. It's a colonial era organization. It has a 170-year history behind it. So this authority functions under the Ministry of Mines, and together they have brought out the draft bill. Now if you look at the key provisions, it defines the geo-heritage sites and geo-relics of India. It provides legal recognition to the 32 sites which I just showed you, the table. And it places entire powers in the hands of the GSI to protect and conserve and maintain these sites. The entire power, the authority to define these sites, identify them, notify them, and to protect and conserve them has been provided to the Geological Survey of India. So these powers include not just the power to declare these sites, but also to take possession of these sites and relics. Once GSI notifies a geo-heritage site, the GSI can possess these sites, it can take over these sites, even if it is a private property. Even if this region, let's say the land around it, is owned by private individuals or by private organizations, this land can be acquired, possessed by the GSI, and it can prohibit construction activities around 100 meters of this important heritage site. If there are any violations, the GSI will acquire penalizing powers as well. It can impose hefty penalties up to 5 lakh rupees and even push towards imprisonment. It can even jail the violators, those who are involved in vandalism, those who are defacing these sites, damaging them, those who are violating the orders of the GSI. They could be punished by the Director General and through the orders of the Director General. This is where a controversy has come up. While such a law is necessary to conserve and protect the geo-heritage sites and the geo-relics, the problem is with all the powers being vested with the GSI. Many critics have pointed out, experts and critics have pointed out, that there is a major problem with the bill. The problem is all the authority is being vested with the Director General of GSI, which makes the Director General an extremely powerful authority, which gives them the power to notify geo-heritage sites and even take over these properties. They can possess the sites, prohibit construction around it, and more importantly, can penalize the violators, which includes hefty fines and even a jail term. Now, these are tremendous powers to be vested in one authority, according to the critics and experts. They are arguing that there should be a broader committee of experts which takes the call, which makes these decisions. It shouldn't be left to the discretion of just one office, one authority to decide these important matters. Many researchers, many experts, paleontologists, they've all argued against the bill, and they have said there is a need to change this provision. The GSI alone cannot be the sole authority here. There should be a broader committee of experts from different domains who will work together, keeping in mind the interests of researchers, the academics, and the overall goal of protecting and conserving these sites. So this is the important analysis that you need to get from this topic. Just remember the key provisions I have pointed out. Take a look at the Geo-heritage sites of India, the UNESCO convention that I pointed out, and what's the controversy surrounding the draft bill. If you're aware of all these points, you can answer any question in prelims and also in mains. Now moving on to the third article, we have an important editorial on page number 6 from Indian Polity. It relates to the office of the governor. So let's take a look at this article. See, recently, new governors have been appointed to few states. I'm sure you would have read this in newspapers, right? And few governors have been transferred as well by the president, that is through the central government. Now, with regard to the appointment of few new governors, a concern has come up, a major concern. Because some of the new governors who have been appointed, right? One of them is a Indian Army chief, an Indian Army commander. One of them is an ex-Supreme Court judge. So the practice of appointing former army officials, former bureaucrats, former diplomats or former intelligence officers, and former judges, especially that of the Supreme Court, appointing them as governors has raised a very serious concern. See, these are institutions which are expected to be independent. Politically, they should be independent. Be it the armed forces, the bureaucracy, right, the security agencies, and of course the judiciary. This in itself is the very bedrock of Indian democracy, the separation of powers between the executive and the judiciary, right? This is what ensures the independence of the judiciary. Similarly, key institutions, including the armed forces and the bureaucracy itself, are expected to be apolitical. They are expected to be neutral, right? Their loyalties are not to the ruling party. Their loyalties are not to the government, but to the Constitution of India. But the practice of appointing retired officials as governors or giving them such lucrative positions raises very important questions about the integrity of these individuals. Even if they haven't done anything adverse, even if they haven't, shown a political bias in their functioning, it does raise questions why the government is doing a favor to former officials by appointing them into key constitutional positions. There are certain positions where future appointments are prohibited. The Constitution itself provides for that. For example, the Chief Election Commissioner, the UPSC Chairman, right? They're not eligible for future appointments. This is to ensure that while they are in service, while they are occupying this key office, they'll not do any favors to the government and the ruling party. To ensure that they have no obligation towards the government, they can function in a free, independent manner. But there are no such restrictions when it comes to Supreme Court judges, with regard to army officials, former bureaucrats, former intelligence officers. There are no such, legal restrictions. There are just guidelines. There is just a code of conduct, which calls for a cooling off period, at least a minimum duration after their retirement before they are appointed again to other offices. But quite often the central government keeps breaching this. It keeps appointing former officials into key offices and raises key questions whether there was a quid pro quo involved. Like I said, even if these officials, these individuals have performed their duties with highest integrity, right? Even then, there will arise a question as to why governments are appointing, why the center especially is appointing former officials from the army, former judges, into the key office of the governor. See, first of all, the office of the governor has raised a lot of controversy. The office of the governor is a colonial relic, right? Since the colonial days, the governor's office was supposed to be a link between the center and the state. But more than often, the office of the governor would become an agent of the center. The governor has always been seen as an agent of the center. Particularly during the colonial period, the governor became a very key authority at the provincial level, right? Where the federal government with the central government would exercise tremendous influence at the provincial level through the office of the governor. Unfortunately, this practice continued post-independence as well. See, our constitution makers, they envisioned the office of the governor as a nominal authority. Despite knowing the misuse of the office of the governor during colonial period, the office was continued because our constitution makers, they felt that the governor's office is a key link. It acts as an important link between the center and the state in a federal setup. But the purpose was to ensure that the governor's office is just a nominal authority. Just a nominal authority exercising discretion only in extraordinary circumstances. For example, when there is a hung government, right? When the election results have delivered a hung legislature, in such few circumstances, the governor is supposed to exercise few discretionary powers. But more importantly, the governor was supposed to act as just a link, enabling the smooth functioning of the Indian polity by linking or connecting the center and the state. It's supposed to be just a nominal authority. But over the years, several central governments, various ruling parties, they have frequently misused the office of the governor to meddle with the state. This has been one of the biggest concerns. Throughout the last 7 decades, subsequent central governments have often misused the office of the governor to create problems for state governments. Because the governor has tremendous powers under Article 356 with regard to President's rule, to recommend President's rule. It's been widely alleged that ruling parties in the past and even currently have often misused this power to push for President's rule, to topple state governments which are ruled by the opposition. You also have other important provisions where the governor plays a critical role. For example, if you look at Article 200, the governor has the authority to give assent to a bill which is enacted by the state legislature, and the governor has the power, the discretionary power here to reserve any bill which is not in line with the Indian Constitution, which is not in line with central laws, and recommend this bill to the president for president's approval. So there have been many instances where governors have withheld the bills that are not in line with the political objective of the ruling party at the center. This has always led to a tug of war, a standoff between center and states, where governor's office has been accused of being misused by the ruling party at the center to either topple the state governments and bring president's rule under Article 356, or to withhold important bills and thereby derail the legislative process at the state level. Now this is seen as a erosion of democracy itself, an erosion of federalism. So there has been a lot of controversy with regard to the office of governor. There have been a lot of recommendations as well by various committees about how the office of the governor has to be limited in its powers and in its functioning. Various Supreme Court rulings also have looked into the same issue. But now this practice of appointing former judges, former officials of the army, former intelligence officers raises very serious questions, because every now and then these appointments appear to be political appointments. The office of the governor is supposed to be unbiased, apolitical, right? So by bringing in former officials, it gives rise to a suspicion that was there any quid pro quo arrangement? Was there any give and take where these officials, when in their capacity, or these judges would have favored the ruling party and the government while they were in the army or in the civil services or while they were in the judiciary? And now as a return favor is the government appointing them as governors, giving them key constitutional positions. That is the question that comes up, a question of integrity about these important offices. It will lead to questions about their future functioning as well as the governor of a state. There are many examples where the tussle between the governor and the state government has led to a complete derailment of democracy itself. Let me give you the example of R.N. Ravi, a former intelligence officer, a retired IPS officer who had served in the intelligence bureau as a special director. R.N. Ravi specialized in counterinsurgency in northeast India, in Jammu and Kashmir. After retirement, he was even part of the Joint Intelligence Committee, the National Security Council. He was a Deputy National Security Advisor. So he was appointed as the governor of Nagaland recently to lead the negotiations with Naga groups, including NSC and IM, to work out a peace process. So this appointment of R.N. Ravi as the governor of Nagaland led to a controversy. There was a major controversy where R.N. Ravi was allegedly taking a very rigid position in these negotiations with Naga insurgents and Naga political groups. And the presence of R.N. Ravi as a governor was resisted by the local people. Later he was transferred to Tamil Nadu, right? Currently he is the governor of Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu as well, R.N. Ravi has triggered a major controversy and has led to a political standoff between the state government and the governor's office. These controversies have again highlighted the issue of misuse of the office of governor, right? Especially when former judges, former officials from institutions which are supposed to be apolitical are appointed. It gives rise to this question about the very integrity of these individuals and the integrity of these offices that they are going to hold. So that is the important issue that the editorial is highlighting, and it suggests that the government should refrain from appointing former judges and former officials, because this is not a good practice. It's not in line with the ethical code of conduct. All right? So with this assessment, let's move on to the next editorial and talk about a very, very important government scheme, the Jal Jeevan Mission. This editorial is evaluating the Jal Jeevan Mission. All right? So let's take a look at this important scheme in complete detail. The topic is very, very important according to me for both prelims and mains. You can expect prelims questions and even a mains question, a detailed question, asking you to evaluate the implementation of this scheme. This important scheme was launched in 2019. It was promised in the 2019-2020 budget by the Modi government. It's a flagship scheme to supply drinking water functional household tap water to rural households by 2024. It's a very ambitious scheme, and if the whole scheme succeeds, it will bring a major developmental change in the rural areas, because water is an absolute necessity, that to clean drinking water. The scheme's objective is to provide functional household tap connections, provide drinking water through tap connections in every rural household, and ensure that at least 55 liters of water per capita per day is supplied to every rural household. This is called functional household tap connectivity. When you provide 55 liters of water per individual per day in every house, it means you have achieved functional household tap connectivity. It's a very important metric to gauge rural development and the provision of water services, basic drinking water services to your population. This important scheme is based on the principle of Jan Andolan. It basically provides for a people's movement. It is based on people's participation, and it provides for a bottom-up approach. The scheme is structured and designed in such a way that instead of center implementing and enforcing it in a centralized manner through a top-bottom approach, right? It's going for a bottom-up decentralized approach where the people and the local institutions, the panchayats, the PRIs, will play a critical role in its implementation. The scheme comes under the Jal Shakti Ministry, the Ministry of Water Resources, and the primary focus is to provide piped tap water connection to all rural households by 2024. It aims to meet the demand by making supply side changes, and it converges all the existing central and state schemes related to water supply in rural areas. So along with supplying quality drinking water, it also focuses on monitoring the quality of the water, testing the quality which is being supplied, and ensure that sustainable agricultural and water management practices are put in place. It also focuses on water conservation, conserving rainwater through rainwater harvesting, recharging the groundwater aquifers, also treating grey water, that is sewage water, the wastewater, and reusing it for agricultural purposes. So that groundwater, which is usually contaminated, right, with various contaminants, could be mainly used for agricultural purposes. And also all the wastewater, the grey water, can be used for agricultural purposes and household purposes, whereas the tap water which will be provided can be specifically used for potable drinking purposes. This is the whole focus and the mission of the Jal Jeevan scheme. Now, if you visit the website of the Jal Shakti Ministry, you'll find a very important infographic that has been shared. According to the Jal Shakti Ministry, when the scheme was launched in 2019, there were just 3.23 crore households in rural areas which had a tapped water connection. Is that clear? According to estimates, there are 19 crore plus rural households in the country, and just 3.23 crore households, barely 20 to 30% of them, had tap water connections. This has jumped in the last 3 years to 9 crore households because of this important scheme. The government has claimed because of Jal Jeevan Mission, 9 crore households have been provided tapped water connections. This scheme is also enabling women empowerment. It enables and helps women in the rural areas because the burden of bringing water has fallen on women because of the patriarchal nature of the Indian society. Many times, because of the lack of tapped water in each house, women have to walk miles together to go to the nearest borewell or well to fetch water and come back. This not only puts a physical strain on them, it also exposes them to a lot of security risks, makes them vulnerable to rapes, molestations as well. So through this scheme, the government hopes to promote women empowerment, women safety as well. And according to government data, at least 50% of the rural households have been provided tapped water connections. Out of 19 crore households, as of 2022, February 2022, 9 crore rural households were covered. Now this in itself is a very big achievement. So the editorial evaluates the recent budget allocation that the government has made, looks at the progress of the scheme, and provides an important analysis. In the recent budget, the finance minister has increased the budget for the scheme by 27%, which is a very significant allocation. The editorial appreciates the government for increasing the budget for this important mission by 27%. This shows the priority the government is allocating to the mission. According to the latest data, according to the 2023 data, out of the 19.3 crore rural households, almost 57% have been covered. In 2022, just 9 crore households were covered. Now it has jumped to 11 crore households, according to the government data. So almost 50% of the targeted beneficiaries have been covered. So still around 8.3 crore households remain. This is where the editorial is expressing a concern. The editorial says the current allocation and the pace of its implementation is not enough if we have to achieve the target by next year. We barely have 12 months left for the target, for the deadline, and 47% of the rural households are yet to be covered. See, the scheme has definitely succeeded. Yes, 11 crore households have been provided with rural tap connection. This is a great achievement. 57% are covered right now. Compared to the previous 15 to 20%, now we have almost extended the coverage to 57%. But to cover the remaining 47%, the next 1 year may not be enough. So that is why the editorial is asking the government to accelerate the scheme. It is pointing out specific data from each state to highlight the shortcomings in the implementation of the mission. Now, if you look at states like Goa, Gujarat, Haryana and Telangana, these states have reported 100% coverage already. This represents a success story. Other states like Punjab and Himachal have reported a coverage of 97%, which is also quite impressive. But the government is focusing more on these states which are closer to the 100% mark. Government is giving more priority to states which already have a 90% plus coverage, so it can push them to 100% coverage. The problem with this approach is that the other states which have a poor coverage, they will get left behind. Especially the larger states, the backward states, like, for example, UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, they report very low coverage under the mission, just around 30 to 47%. These large populous states which are falling behind, they are not being given adequate attention. The government is more focused on numbers. Obviously, the government wants to achieve success and show on paper that we have achieved 100% coverage in so many states. So as a result, priority has been given to states which are already closer to the 100% mark. But the real focus should have been on the larger backward states where we are missing the target. So this is the flaw, the shortcoming that the editorial is highlighting. The editorial also points out that if you have to provide functional tap water connection, that is 55 liters of water, drinking water for every person per day in every household, then you need to ensure this is provided 24/7 and 365 days a year, at least for half a day throughout the year, right? But studies on the ground have shown, even though 100% connection coverage has been achieved in certain states, the supply of water is not constant. The pipe tap water has been provided, the tap connection has been given, but there is no water flow, there is no water supply. According to certain studies, in several rural households, despite the tap connection provided, there is no water flow. Water is provided hardly 2 to 3 hours. It's provided only 3 to 4 days a week. So this defeats the purpose again. If you have to achieve fully functional tap water connection, then you need to ensure 55 liters is provided every day. At least few hours of water supply every single day. But in several states, despite having coverage, despite having 90%, 100% coverage, the local studies have shown that the water flow is limited. Water is supplied only for 2 hours a day, and that too sometimes just 3-4 days a week. So this highlights the shortcoming of the scheme. In fact, a study that was commissioned by the Ministry of Water Resources itself has found out that only 3/4 of the households have reported 7-day water supply. Almost 25% are not getting 24/7 or 7-day a week supply. And even this water supply is just for 3 hours a day, which may not meet the 55 liter requirement per capita per day. All right. Even the rural schools and Anganwadi centers, which play a critical role in education and healthcare, even though they have been provided tapped connections, water supply is intermittent. It's not supplied through the week. It's not supplied for more number of hours. And also the water quality is very poor. The studies have shown the water is contaminated with chlorine and bacteria, and also with other contaminants like arsenic, which is extremely harmful as it leads to a number of conditions and life-threatening diseases. So the editorial is saying that coverage is not the only focus. The quantity should not be the only priority. Achieving 100% coverage should not just be the blind focus of the government. Right now, the government is blindly focusing on statistics, numbers. So the editorial says there should be a slight change of approach to focus on the quality of the water and also the consistency with which the water is being supplied through these taps. That is when the scheme will become a success. Right? So the editorial is pointing out, focus on consistency, increase the number of hours of water supply, ensure it is supplied through the week, through the year, 365 days a year. Ensure the quality is better, right? Provide for better water conservation measures as well. Instead of just focusing on the coverage numbers, achieving 100% tapped connections. That alone will not help us meet the objective of providing clean drinking water to our rural households. All right? So this is the important argument being made. And this article is very important because providing clean water is a sustainable development goal as well. By 2030, India is striving along with other countries under the UN targets to provide clean water to all the households. So if we have to succeed in the mission, quantity and coverage should not just be the focus, the quality and the consistency of the supply should also be the focus. So with this, let's move to the last article for today related to governance, geography and disaster management. It's related to the topic of urban planning, specifically in hilly areas, because of late we have noticed a rising disaster risk in our urban areas. Major cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, Bengaluru are all hit with massive floods during the monsoon season, right? They witness frequent flooding. Then the hilly urban areas in Uttarakhand, in Sikkim, in Northeast India, right? They are witnessing frequent landslides, especially the recent Joshimath crisis has highlighted the issue of land subsidence, where the slopey area is sinking, subsiding because of the damaged aquifers due to big projects. Big dam projects like the Tapovan project in the region has reportedly damaged the aquifers and has reportedly been one of the reasons for the land subsidence, which has weakened the soil structure. So ad hoc urbanization, rampant spreading of the urban areas in hilly slopey areas has weakened the soil structure and the very integrity of the slope, especially in Gangtok, Aizwal, in various places in Uttarakhand, in Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir. These are very sensitive locations. Same goes for Western Ghats. There are a lot of urban areas in Kerala, Karnataka as well, along the slopey areas. So rampant urbanization without adequate planning is increasing the risk of disasters, according to the writer. Land subsidence has become a common occurrence in India, and according to a study, 12.6% of our land area is prone to landslides. Just look at this map, which was brought out by the National Institute of Disaster Management. This was brought out as part of the National Landslide Risk Management Strategy, which is a part of our disaster management strategy. According to this study, the most landslide prone areas are in the Himalayan belt and in the Western Ghats, particularly Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Northeast India and Western Ghats region. They are highly prone to landslides, and land subsidence is increasing the risk of landslides. These slopey land areas are subsiding, sinking day by day. The slope's integrity has been threatened due to rampant urbanization and unplanned urban activity. So that is why the writer is urging that urban planning should be a priority focus. Be it hilly areas or be it regular cities, urban planning is critical. Ensuring that our cities are disaster resilient should become a priority for the planning authorities, especially the local bodies. So the writer says there are certain important measures that we need to take. First, we need to collect credible data to point out the extent of land subsidence that is happening in our hilly urban areas, especially in Uttarakhand, Sikkim and Northeast India. if you have to figure out the threat for each city located on hilly slopes, you need to get granular level data. You need to localize the data, and that is when you can plan your urban development accordingly. Based on the risk profile of each region, of each slopy area, you need to come out with customized plans and restrict urban activities and construction activities. The Geological Survey of India has already come out with a national map with a scale of 1:50,000. Each unit, each centimeter here represents 0.5 kilometers in geographical area. So to this extent, a national mapping exercise has been carried out which provides for a decent amount of local data for urban planning. But the writer says this is still not enough. If you have to deal with the threats of landslides and land subsidence, you need to go further down to the scale of 1:1000 at least. For every 100 meters essentially, there should be data available with regard to the integrity and the structure of the land and the soil structure. If this data is not available to urban planners and policy makers, that is when mistakes will happen. That is when rampant urbanization will happen and the building bylaws will not be enough to restrict the construction and urban activities. If this local data, granular data is available at the range of 1:1000, at the range of every 100 meters, then the local bodies, the municipal bodies, corporations, etc., they could bring out the right bylaws. The policy makers can restrict large infrastructure projects. They can place restrictions on buildings, the standard of the buildings to be constructed. They can come out with stricter standards for the foundation of the building to ensure that the buildings remain safe and the structure and the integrity of the slope is well protected. This is where the writer gives an example. There are few successful examples in India, especially Gangtok and Aswal. These are slopy urban areas located in the Himalayan belt. This represents a very high seismic zone. They are located in zone 5. They are highly prone to earthquakes happening in the Himalayan belt. Despite this, the hilly slopy areas in Aswal and Gangtok are quite well protected according to the writer because some local planning measures have been taken up. Better disaster resilience has been built into these cities. If you look at Aswal, the local authorities have planned an action plan at a scale of 1:500. Is that clear? They have brought out a very customized plan for almost every 50 meters and they have restricted construction activities in the most hazardous areas, in the disaster prone areas. So through this planning, Aswal has been made resilient against landslides and the impact of earthquakes. Or else a high intensity earthquake, which is 7 and above on the Richter scale, can trigger hundreds of landslides in Aswal alone. The same is the risk profile for Gangtok in Sikkim. But here, authorities, the disaster management authorities and the local authorities have implemented a real-time landslide monitoring and early warning system with adequate sensors to track the amount of rainfall, the water flow, the slope stability, and how the soil structure is getting affected by the flow of water and excessive rainfall. So this is a real-time early warning system that provides for enough advance warning to protect the population and mitigate the impact of the disaster. So these are some positive examples, some success stories we need to take and adopt in our cities, especially those located in the hilly regions of Western Ghats and also in the Himalayan belt. Similarly, we should focus on urban planning across Indian cities, especially with regard to the risk of flooding. Be it a hilly area or be it a plain area, right? Flood risk has become a major threat. Cities like Chennai, Mumbai on the coastal plains are witnessing massive flooding risk. Cities like Bengaluru, which are located at a decent altitude, even they are facing increasing flooding risk, and this is a direct result of poor urban development, poor urban planning. So the writer is suggesting that we have to flood-proof our cities. We have to take multiple measures to prevent, reduce and mitigate the floods. These urban floods are largely man-made than natural. So we can prevent encroachments which are blocking the natural drainage channels. We have to widen the storm drain network, the sewage network to accommodate the additional flow of water during rainy season. We have to desilt the water bodies, the canals and the channels so they can hold more water during excess rainfall. But encroachments are the biggest problem. Most of the lakes, wetlands have been destroyed in our cities which were acting as a natural buffer. These were like natural sponges which would absorb the excess water during rainy season. But these wetlands, natural ponds and lakes have been destroyed due to rapid unplanned urbanization. They have been largely encroached by the real estate mafia. Local authorities have failed to prevent this. So that is why the writer is urging multiple steps to be taken immediately to make our cities disaster proof and disaster resilient. You can even take up flood resilient architecture. City design has to be such that it should be flood resilient. It should be able to accommodate the excess water. The drainage channel should be improved to increase the water carrying capacity. So all these measures have to be implemented comprehensively as part of the disaster management planning and urban planning. So this is the point that the writer Varun Gandhi, MP, is making, and it's a very, very important argument as far as disaster management and governance is concerned. So this brings my discussion to an end. We have 2 practice questions for you for your mains. Please take the questions, write answers to them based on what we have discussed. Post your answers in the answer writing portal as well. The link has been given in the description. And don't forget, as soon as the session ends, we have a quiz on our Telegram channel. So directly head to the Telegram channel, subscribe to it using the link in the description below, and take these practice questions. It will help you revise these topics again and thoroughly prepare for the upcoming prelims. So I hope it's been a good, fruitful session. Do let me know how it went. Give us more likes, show us more love and support so we are motivated to deliver better content. That is it for today. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.